Okay, so this one's going to be a bit of a doozy. Why? Because I've never been at odds with a game that, according to Steam, I should love. It's overwhelmingly positive, for God's sake, so you'd think I'd also be raving about this game. But unfortunately, I'll tell you straight up that as I was playing it, I flip-flopped a lot in what score I was going to give it. Now, I'm not saying something being overwhelmingly positive, I hate that word. I'm not saying something being overwhelmingly positive on Steam indicates that you should and will love this, but I expected I'd like it more than I did, is what I'm really saying. So essentially, at first I was loving my time with it for the first half of the game, and then after the halfway point, coupled with some other gripes I had with it from the beginning, my opinion shifted. So, starting with the positives, just because that's the easiest thing for me to talk about, visually, the game is very decent to look at. Not the best, not the worst, but definitely stylized, and I really like the way they pull it off here. It goes for that pixely retro boomer shooter style that we all know and love, and that gives it its own form of grit and viscerality, you get it. It can be anywhere from very beautiful at times in its own way to ew, but intentional ew. Downside is, much like with Proteus, Turbo Overkill looks very samey after a while in a sea of blues, reds, purples, and sometimes greens. Don't get me wrong, the game does go out of its way to change things up in gameplay and where you are, but sometimes when I think back on that game, all I can remember is some of the samey looking environments. So nothing really stood out to me, is what I'm really trying to say. It looks good, but nothing really stood out aside from one section in particular. Musically, the game's score is also really good, but it's also nothing that I would deem as outstanding or memorable, but it's also not offensive. I didn't cringe at anything that I was listening to, and I hate saying the word cringe as much as you probably do, but I'm just saying nothing in there made me react like, I don't know if I'm a fan of this track playing. No, it's got some good tunes in there, for sure. Gameplay-wise, the game is excellent and a lot of fun to play. It's primarily focused around movement, mostly sliding with your chainsaw leg. That's right, chainsaw leg. It's a pretty cool way to encourage more aggressive gameplay instead of only really using sliding to get out of problems. There are also plenty of guns, but there were very few that I really felt attached to, which is common for me with boomer shooters like this. If you give me 9 to 12 weapons, I may only really use 4 to 6 out of them, with 2 of those out of the 4 to 6 only really being used for crowd control. By the end of the game, I mostly only used 2 weapons. What's really cool, and something I didn't expect, is that you can upgrade your guns at a guns kiosk for a fee, giving them preset alternate fire abilities that are actually really useful. I say that I didn't expect it because not every boomer shooter does that. Typically, at least from the ones I've played, the only thing you really get in the form of upgrades is here's a new gun to outclass your last gun. But in Turbo Overkill, it's, hey, your old gun just needs a new upgrade. There you go. It has a new upgrade. Now it's on par with the other one. These 2 shotguns ultimately do the bing, bang, boom, but they do the bing, bang, boom differently. This one goes bing, bang, boom, and this one goes bling, bong, bong, boom. If you get that reference, leave a like. Don't actually leave a like for that, please. I hate saying that. I just said it for the joke. But once again, even the upgrade system didn't stop me from ultimately only favoring 1 or 2 of the guns out of the bunch by the end of the game, which again is not a problem. It's just how I am. Another thing gameplay-wise that is pretty neat is that the levels require keys to go from one to another. This tends to be the case from what I've seen with these kinds of games, but the levels aren't linear and have some verticality to them. So while yes, ultimately you're going to go through that singular door at the end of the level, there are a lot of different places to explore in the level in the meantime before you get through that door, and sometimes you can get over different obstacles if you're clever. I don't want to say clever enough. If you are confident enough in your ability to parkour, meaning in your ability to take your chainsaw leg slide and go from one side of a building to the other one without using a jump pad or something, if you want to get a secret thing that's floating around there. Some of the levels can be frustrating to navigate with an inconsistent compass and a lack of a map, but ultimately, I appreciate that I can essentially skip enemies entirely if I don't want to kill them, so I can just get to the next level. Okay, now for the negatives. So here's the thing, originally I had written out this script criticizing the game's length. I love playing long games. I love Persona, I love JRPGs, and I will likely play Metaphor ReFantazio one of these days. Not to review, but just for me. I have games like that. There are plenty of games I finished in between these reviews that were just for me, Silent Hill 2 being one of them. But with Turbo Overkill, though, I was wondering why I was burning out after episode 2. I had thoughts like, did I play too much of this and really need to stop? No, I took plenty of breaks and played other games. Sometimes I go about a day or two without playing it and just let it sit. Maybe I just wasn't vibing with the game as much as I thought I would when playing it. I don't think it was that either. Remember, I said it's very fun to play, and I never felt bored. This is me saying that now. I never felt bored while playing it. The conclusion I came to was the game's story, and to some extent that the game was a bit too long for what was on offer. But what was on offer was, in fact, the story. If the story didn't go on for as long as it did, the game would have been much shorter. So, still the story. I still had fun towards the end of the game, but mentally I was checked out halfway through episode 3. But yeah, I came to the conclusion that it's mostly the story that started waning on me, since if the story was excellent through and through, I think that would have helped me push through the last hours of the game without burning out by halfway through episode 3. So let's break it down for a second. Turbo Overkill is spread out into 3 episodes. Each episode houses about 8 levels a pop. At first, I thought the levels were just a little too long at times, and frankly, I still think that for some levels that could have been tighter, a little shorter, but my actual problem was that I was engaged gameplay-wise, but not narratively. At this point, I'm being a dead horse, I know. Let's continue with the explanation then. Like character spoilers ahead. Turbo Overkill's story was one that I thought was just going to serve as a general backdrop to the fights I get into and the venues I visit. Just a reason for doing things. I didn't care about it in the first episode and most of the second episode because the game really didn't give me the urge to care. It certainly tried, but fell flat for me on a first impression basis. In Turbo Overkill, you play as Johnny Turbo as he makes his way through paradise to get revenge and destroy the sentient AI infecting the world known as Sin. The AI is known as Sin, not the world. The backstory of Johnny Turbo is actually pretty interesting. In the data discs, dead drops essentially, you find help give further context to what happened to him. But it just made me wish I experienced that because maybe I would have had some form of connection to the story, because once you start the game, it kind of just drops you in the middle of that. You get a bit of what happened, but most of it is, yeah, that job back there really fucked you up. That thing that happened to you, man, yeah, that sucked. You're already past the interesting stuff that would have made me actually want to go after these people. And I repeat, if this were a game that just strictly used that as a backdrop for why you go into each level and fuck shit up, that would have been fine. But because story is clearly at the forefront here, and there's a lot of stuff I should be caring about with who I'm fighting, there's a disconnect. Now, Johnny is a silent protagonist, so I don't know what he's thinking most of the time. That said, he is very expressive, which is pretty fun, through his hand motions and all that. He's got attitude in spades, but while I like silent protagonists, I really wish he had a voice for this because his edge would have been a nice counterbalance to his AI companion, Sam. Sam is the AI companion that spews exposition, which is interesting to hear, but he doesn't say a lot in episode 1 compared to the later episodes. But other than that, Sam is fine. Funny, sometimes even. Initially, you're taking orders from the exec who, let me just tell you flat out, just gonna be honest here, is the most annoying character I have heard in a while. It's not her voice. She is very well acted, very well performed. Kudos. No, it's just the excessive swearing and general intensity she brings. Now, don't get me wrong. I like intense. I like some edge. I am very much used to swearing. I may not do it a lot here, but I am used to hearing it. My ears are not that delicate, but she comes off as overly edgy, like she's trying too hard, and like she just discovered the word fuck yesterday and is trying to find as many places to shove it in as possible. These are the characters you'll be with for episode 1. In episode 2, you're introduced to more characters, including Ma, the other main antagonist besides Sin. The problem I had with Ma that I didn't have with Sin is that while Sin was very one note, I'd take her any day over Ma, since Ma was really just Rice from Dying Light. Except replace the "what is a man" talk that Rice did in Dying Light with "we could be gods" and technology will help us surpass our flesh speak. To me, maybe not to some other player, he was a grunt character that the story decided to make important and it just didn't work for me. He didn't earn my ire in the way the game intended. Like, I'm all for the character you least expect to be someone you're going to encounter a lot in the game angle. I'm completely fine with that, but there's a way to do that to make me care more. And it just didn't happen here. I didn't want to kill him for payback, or because I didn't agree with his views. No, I wanted to kill him to get him to shut up. At least in Dying Light, Crane told Rice to shut up in the end when he started with his whole "what is a man" speech. Because Johnny's silent, I don't really get that benefit. I'm the one telling him through the screen, dude, shut up. You're annoying. Anyway, with all of that said though, I'm not saying the story isn't competent, because it is. Just because I didn't like it doesn't mean it wasn't structured well. It just means that what you did with that structure is something I don't agree with, but it was still competently told. It just turned out meh for me. Beyond the game dragging me through a meh story and the gameplay itself being a lot of fun, I don't really have much else to say about the game that is particularly bad or that I just didn't like myself. There is a pretty nasty bug with a quick save in one of the later levels, Night Ride, where if you reload your save during a specific enemy encounter, you'll load into the same room, but the enemies won't spawn, and you need the enemies to spawn there so you can kill them to get out. So yeah, that's a pretty rough one. And actually, there are a few different times I've soft-locked in-game while going through it. That's just the first one that comes to mind. There's another one towards the end of the game. In fact, it's the final level, where if you reload or die while destroying some cores, the game will soft-lock and enemies won't spawn, once again, and the game won't progress. In fact, and this is a biggie, the only reason I managed to beat the game is because they allow you to use the console command line while playing by default. I don't know if that's intentional or not. So I just no-clip through the door. Yeah, that's rough, buddy. There's also another bug that I think I should mention despite it being pretty minor. It's when you kill some enemies and they drop cash. If you pick it all up at once, it dings very loudly, as if every time you've picked up money from them, from the entire group, it ticks. And it plays the audio on each tick, and it just dings very loudly at once. I've seen that kind of bug in other games, but I just don't know how to describe it. That's the best way I can describe it. I'm not an audio guy. Other than that, I'll wrap this review up here. Now, here's where it's going to get difficult again. If you are someone who listened to this review and thought, Daryl, I don't give two shits about the story, you're blowing this way out of proportion, man, then I genuinely give it a go for it, because the gameplay is a blast. But if you're anything like me and thought, that story sounds kind of meh, and I don't want to play a game that is lengthened that long to facilitate what is ultimately a meh story just to have some great gameplay for that long, then I would say caution. The final score I want to personally give Turbo Overkill for everything I've mentioned is caution. Now, I've explained the caution score before, back with Slitterhead, and I think I did it with Wanted Dead, but I'm just going to briefly talk about it again here. Caution does not equal bad game. It just means, how much do I recommend this to you? Avoid being, I don't recommend this to anyone. I might have liked it, but I know I am an anomaly in this. Maybe don't pick this up unless you are someone like who thinks like I do, or has fun with games the way I do. Caution is, I can recommend it, but just know that there are some caveats here, and go for it. Obviously, I'm kicking you through the door to go buy it. I'll admit that the avoid definition could use a bit more work, but I also haven't had to use avoid all that often. And even then, when I gave an avoid to The Good Life, I still liked aspects of it. I just knew that, no, I can't recommend this to anyone else. Avoid felt appropriate. I haven't had to use avoid in the case of I hate it and therefore other people should too. That's just not how I think. So if you really want to play Turbo Overkill, despite what I said about the story and stuff, there is a good time in there. Ignore the tape and ignore me. But if you want to hold off on it, then I would say wait to get it on sale. Turbo Overkill is $25 and available on PC, Nintendo Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series S and X. And that's that for my shooting spree. For legal reasons, I'm not talking about real life. I'll still review shooters going forward here and there, but at this point, I'm going back to reviewing any game I feel like. So, I hope you all have enjoyed your stay. I'm TUSDarryl, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye.